called a panic room.
What?
The idea of having a protected room within your dwelling seems appealing on the surface, but anyone that needs one of those can't be getting up to anything good. You're just asking for trouble, and that's precisely what happened to Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart in David Fincher's 2002 thriller. And the film itself has had quite the journey, from Nicole Kidman and Hayden Panettiere being replaced as the leads, to it only having a DVD release until very recently, to a surprise pregnancy that shut down production. There's plenty to break down here, so let's dive into what happened to David Fincher's Panic Room.
We're not coming out.
And we're not letting you in. Get out of my house!
Say fuck.
Fuck!
Panic Room started as an idea from David Koepp in the year 2000. He had been watching various news reports and was fascinated at the rise of panic rooms in metropolitan areas. He quickly wrote the script and sold the rights to Sony. Ridley Scott floated around the project, and actor Forrest Whitaker even toyed with the idea of directing the film, as he was fascinated by the script. Eventually, David Fincher boarded the project, and the production was quickly off to the races. Fincher pre-vised the entire movie, working out the intricate camera moves through a mix of digital storyboarding and models.
Mom, get the fuck out of my house.
Get the fuck out of my house!
The story of Panic Room follows newly divorced Meg Altman, as she and her daughter Sarah move into a new house together. The house has a pretty cool feature: an urban bunker, otherwise known as a panic room. But on their first night, a group of burglars break in, causing Meg and Sarah to take refuge in the room. Unfortunately for them, what the burglars need is inside that room, resulting in a standoff that takes many unexpected turns. Nicole Kidman was originally cast in the role of Meg Altman, with the focus being on her glamour and physicality. It would be a stark contrast to Hayden Panettiere, who had been cast as Sarah, Meg's diabetic daughter, and had more of a tomboy aesthetic. But many things would happen to change the cast, as Hayden left the project just before cameras got rolling. Kristen Stewart was then cast in an effort to further lean into Sarah being the antithesis of Meg. Filming got underway in January of 2001 in Manhattan Beach, California, with the house and surrounding brownstones created in a soundstage. Despite having such a contained environment, the shoot was anything but easy. Just 2 weeks into filming, Nicole Kidman injured her knee and was forced to drop from the picture. Sadly, it wasn't even an injury from this production, as it had occurred while filming Moulin Rouge and just never fully healed. Fincher was fine with shutting down until an actor could be found, but the studio was insistent that they find a replacement quick and not interrupt filming. So the director continued filming any scene that he could that didn't require the presence of the Meg character, mostly focusing on the burglars played by Jared Leto, Forrest Whitaker, and Dwight Yoakam. Originally, Fincher actually wanted Tool singer Maynard James Keenan as Raoul, but he was unable to accept the role. The part of Burnham was originally intended to be the designer of the panic room itself, but Fincher reasoned that this kind of person wouldn't be persuaded to become a thief. So instead, his job was changed to panic room installer, making his switch more believable. And of course, Fincher had worked with Leto in Fight Club. Angelina Jolie, Sandra Bullock, and Robin Wright were all rumored for the part. Thankfully, after years of trying to work together, Jodie Foster was available and was able to join the film, garnering a whopping $12 million salary. She actually had to give up her role on the Cannes Film Festival jury in order to take the part. I guess I would for a check like that too. When Foster came aboard, it was decided to tweak both characters. Meg would go from helpless to more take charge, and Sarah would carry on several traits of her mother. Fincher said that it was fascinating to see the performance through the lens of Kidman and then Foster, two world-class actors. And we would even get an uncredited cameo from Kidman as the voice of Meg's ex-husband's supermodel girlfriend.
Put Steven on the line.
Who is this?
It's Meg.
Do you know what time it is?
And shout out to Seven screenwriter Andrew Kevin Walker, who appears here as the sleepy neighbor annoyed by the flashlight. Fincher brought along his '7 cinematographer Darius Condi to shoot the film. Like most of Fincher's work at the time, he shot it using the Super 35 format. This would allow the filmmakers to shoot with a larger canvas and then cut down the image in post-production by adding the black bars there and presenting it in widescreen. While not as much of an issue these days, at the time, filmmakers had to account for full-screen releases on TV, as well as the widescreen theatrical releases. So this was a way to make up for that. But Condi wouldn't make it long, as he and Fincher disagreed on how to shoot the film, resulting in Conrad W. Hall replacing him. A mere 5 weeks into filming, Jodie Foster discovered that she was pregnant. Fincher tried to accommodate her by covering her in a sweater and having her stunt double do anything too intensive, but the studio felt that it was too noticeable in the dailies, so production was shut down until Foster gave birth. When filming finally got underway again, Fincher's perfectionism wasn't easy for the cast and crew to contend with. Take, for example, a scene where Raoul tries breaking into the panic room from below, spraying plaster all over the room with his sledgehammer. It took nearly 45 minutes for the wall to be replaced and be ready for another take. Something so simple on the page took nearly 2 days to shoot. And Fincher was a stickler for authenticity, so they actually brought in a real-life safecracker in order to walk them through how to realistically crack open a safe. And despite the film being a thriller set in a house, Panic Room really pushes the boundaries with its special effects. Even the opening credits, while dated now, are far more complicated than at first glance. If you want to laugh, watch visual effects supervisor Kevin Haig discuss the visual effects in the film as he just looks back on the lunacy of Fincher's perfection and is clearly glad to have it well behind him. What looks like physical camera movements are actually all visual effects shots. Live-action plates were shot over a 10-day period around New York City using IMAX cameras as it allowed the largest canvas to work with. Then they would combine it with still shots to create the visual effect of the camera movement and the titles looking like they exist within the city. Nearly every camera movement within the film had to be smoothed out with CGI, giving it an overly perfect quality that only Fincher can manage. To achieve this, they used a motion-tracked crane, called the Technicrane, which allowed the director to achieve even greater perfection. In fact, he even started using it for basic shots, as he found that the camera ops just weren't quite getting what he wanted. As unnatural as this shot feels, where the camera travels from the propane tank to the wall, it's actually a motion-controlled shot that then transitions to an effect once it gets close to the hose. Same with this shot that goes from Foster in the bed to the line of monitors. 44 takes with a traditional dolly later, Fincher went with the motion control team to achieve his vision. The most complicated scene of all came from the 2-minute 47-second one-shot that features the arrival of the burglars. Referred to as the big shot, this is made up of 5 live-action plates with a CGI transition in between each one. The sequence was filmed and reshot throughout production and ended up being a massive pain in the ass. Even shots that were intended to be live action ended up being nearly entirely CGI. The only part of this shot that's real is Forrest Whitaker coming up to the window. Even the reflections are fake. There are multiple times where the camera moves through the floor, and even when filmed practically, needed to have an effect added over it as the area simply showed as black in between those floorboards. For the final shot of the film, which sees Meg and Sarah house hunting, it was originally intended to be shot against the city skyline. In order to get a more dramatic shot of the buildings, the production built a raised bench. Then they reverse dolly zoomed in to make it appear as though the city is growing around them, despite them staying relatively the same size. This ending was reconceived, but the reverse dolly zoom remains, though with much less effect without the city skyline being warped around them. While Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis are both known for their creature work on Predator and Alien, they also did the makeup effects here. What may have seemed like something simple, like fake fingers, became a pain for the two special effects legends. When Fincher saw the fake fingers, his reaction was, "They look like rubber Cheetos." Obviously, they found this offensive and looked to fix the problem. They also did a broken collarbone effect on Patrick Bacau's Stephen Altman character.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
You hear me? Open your hands!
Test audiences were not fans of the film's ending, with Burnham being arrested by police. But by the time that feedback came in, the sets had already been demolished, and it was deemed too expensive to reshoot. So instead, the editors went in and chose takes of Burnham, which made him less likable. This results in a really uneven character who both earns the viewer's sympathies, but is also a bit cold and harsh. Panic Room released in the United States on March 29, 2002, and brought in over $30 million on its opening weekend. The film would end its worldwide run at over $197 million. The movie was adequately liked, earning a 76% and 64% respectively on Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus being that it was elevated by David Fincher's directorial talent and Jodie Foster's performance. Panic Room is a well-crafted, above-average thriller. Fincher disagreed with Columbia's marketing for the film, as they made it seem similar to past Fincher hits Seven and Fight Club, and he didn't think Panic Room matched their tone and felt that it was more in line with movies like Kiss the Girls and The Bone Collector. Despite that, Panic Room ended up being one of the largest grosses of Fincher's career, and the film had a very complicated physical media history. While it received 2 different DVD releases, there were no Blu-rays produced once those came into vogue. It wasn't until this past February that we finally received an HD release of the film, with Fincher himself supervising a 4K cut. The original film was mastered in 2K, so it did have to be upscaled to 4K, and Fincher being such a perfectionist resulted in some pretty strange changes. I guess changing the directions of cans of Coke and straightening out curtains was very important to him. While Panic Room has a complicated place in Fincher's filmography, it pushed the boundaries of CGI and introduced the world to Kristen Stewart. While it wasn't an easy path getting made, it certainly was an interesting one.
My room. Definitely my room.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.